right. I am testing live from the Pantages Hotel in Toronto. Well, looks like we got some viewers already. Hey, everyone. I see my buddy Roy from Dice Tower. How's it going? Hey, look at all you guys. Oh, my boss is online too. Here we are. Okay, so I'm going to start a little early. It's 3 minutes before 1 o'clock, but I just want to say hello to all of our Trudvang backers. My name is Eric Lang. I'm the game director at CMON, and I'm also one of the designers of Trudvang. There are 5 of us. It's the biggest design team we've ever had for a game, for possibly the most ambitious game we've ever done. We are here to answer gameplay-specific questions about Trudvang. And just before I start, I just want to let you guys know how excited I'm to be here and how excited I'm to answer some of these questions. This is a game we've been working on for like 2 years, and any game that we're working on this long, like we're so excited to talk about it, and it's almost like it's a little stressful that we can't talk about this cool thing we've been working on for so long. And so now we finally get to, but I still have to be careful because it's a story-based game and there's a lot of spoilers. So I'm a little, in this particular case, I'm going to be a little bit more careful than normal. And I can't spoil everything. And this game has actually been a little bit of a struggle to talk about, admittedly, because this is such a narrative game and it's got this really cool, deep, sprawling story, we wanted to make sure not to spoil anything for those who care, who want to be surprised by the story, which I assume is going to be a big percentage of our players. And the story is so well intertwined with the mechanics of the game that we've had to keep some mechanics from you guys because spoiling those mechanics will also spoil some of the story points. So where you might have noticed that we're a little bit light with how much we expose to the game in this case, that's why. But I'm here to demystify some of the gameplay and talk about some of the cool, exciting scenarios. A couple caveats. The first one is everything I talk about in terms of gameplay will be is theoretically true and possible to do in the legend system and in Trudvang. However, to save you guys from too many story spoilers, there's 2 points. The first, I'm not going to go into any specifics of story. So I'm not going to name any of the characters. I'm not going to name any of the locations. I'm going to be very generic in how we'll talk about that. And number 2, in the sort of clever designery way, I'm going to be not everything I tell you is actually going to be in the story, but everything I tell you is going to be theoretically true. So this is stuff that our dev team has been talking about for a long time. We know all this is possible. We know all these scenarios can be done because we played them. But to save you from spoilers, I'm going to put a little bit of mystery in there and just say that not everything that I say is actually going to be in the story, but it could be. So we get a little bit of 2 truths and a lie going. So I'm just going to start off with our questions. I've got a question right here. Is what is your background in role-playing games? What have you played? And set corollary is what is your favorite class in the game and why? So I love questions like this. My background is in role-playing games. I'm not sure how many people know this, but I actually started gaming with D&D special edition, second edition, back in '98, the year it came out. I started with Spelljammer, which is by now a pretty obscure systems D&D in space, and I played that for 2.5 years, I think, before I played anything else. It instantly made me a gamer. I became obsessed with the lifestyle and the hobby, and of course, being who I am, I'm a creative guy. I like to, I of course designed like 3 or 4 role-playing games just off of my experience with D&D. None of them were published, but I was super excited about it. Since then, in the '90s, I played, you name it, I played it. I played White Wolf, World of Darkness. I played many TSR games. I played James Bond. I played Chill, Call of Cthulhu especially. Our Talsorian games, Cyberpunk, Teenagers from Outer Space, Mechton. I played tons and tons of campaign worlds, and I've even started getting back into modern indie RPGs. The field has advanced a lot since then. I'm really excited about what's going in there. We're currently going to do a session of Dogs in the Vineyard at Gen Con. I'm very excited about that. My favorite class in Trudvang. So I'm going to be a little bit coy. I'm going to say it's the Bard. It's my second favorite class. And there's the reason it's my second favorite class. I'm not talking about my first, is for spoiler reasons. The Bard I really like because in RPGs and role-playing games, I like to play support classes. I love that feeling of the party is just so much more awesome because I'm in it, and by cleverly managing how I buff the party, it can spell the difference between success and failure. So in MMOs and role-playing games, I'm a big World of Warcraft player, right? So I loved playing the Shaman, the buff Shaman, and I loved playing in EverQuest. I loved playing the Enchanter, who did crowd control and clarity. Everybody remember that? I love that kind of stuff. And so with a Bard, we really wanted to make a class that felt like they were not just a support characters, like they kick butt on their own, but they're really, really good at managing the party in general and helping the party. All right, we've got more questions coming up. So how does this game scale depending on the number of players? And can you tell us about playing solo? So we've, of course, it's a cooperative game, and we think a lot about game scaling issues. There are 3 obvious ways and 2 non-obvious ways, one of which I can't even talk about. So we scaled the game in one obvious way, of course, where generally when the game spawns monsters, or when the story spawns monsters and difficult obstacles, we generally scale that to player count, right? So for example, if you encounter a passage, or if you are traveling across a border, and you'll get a travel card that says you may get you run into a number of druggers. It'll always be based on the number of players in the party. So of course, if you are a single player, it'll be a little bit easier, and then a little bit easier for one person. But if you're playing with multiples, it can be harder. We also wanted to make, we also have a couple, which I can't quite talk about because it's a little bit spoilerish, but a couple of clever mechanisms in there to also make sure that to maintain that really cool balance between, do we stick together or do we spread out? And that also is tied into the player scaling. We also have, there are some timing mechanisms in the game. Some of them overt and a little spoilers because they come in later in the game, and I'll talk about a couple in the abstract later on. And then there is, and then there's subtle. So the way that the game works in general, players are always trying to succeed at holding guardianship over the world, right? The world of Trudvang is like the 5th character in your campaign, and you are always trying to guard the special locations, or in harmony, the cool special things that you yourself, what we in dev call good cards, while the story, of course, is trying to do the opposite. Where the story is putting the world into peril chapter by chapter, and is trying to put the world into more danger. So with that in mind, you have to decide as a group, and the imperiling mechanics are also going to be based on number of players. So, for example, there might be a spawn point somewhere on the map that you guys let happen in the earlier story. There might be a Draugr spawn point in the north. That thing's going to be spitting out, based on a particular trigger, will be spitting out a number of Draugrs equal to the number of players at all times. And the monsters all have this really different and intelligent behavior based on based on how we design them, and B, also on how the story has progressed. So for example, Draugrs, for example, they may be, they're undead invaders. They may be always heading towards cities, turn after turn after turn. So the longer you dally, the more they are going to be actually attacking, the closer they're going to get to attacking that city, and losing those cities is a major drawback for you, not only for the session, but for the entire campaign. So those are a little bit subtle, and there are other scaling mechanics which I cannot talk about because they change based on the choices that you make, or the situations that happen to you in the story itself. All right, so based on player decisions, will some stories not be available in a specific campaign? How long does combat last, and how important is it to the story? I'm going to answer these separately because it's one question, but it's two parts. So based on player decisions, will some stories not be available in a specific campaign? Absolutely. One of the coolest devices that we as developers like to use is mutual exclusivity. So let's say, for example, you're playing a campaign of Trudvang. Now, we said that there are going to be 30 stories in the core game storybook. Now, you are not going to play all 30 of those stories in a campaign. In fact, there are multiple ways that the campaign can end, and all of them are very different, and they're all going to be based on the results of the story that you've already played. So, I'm just going to move up the camera here because I'm getting a couple of complaints about audio. I hope that's better. All right, so there are, as you progress through the campaign, there are at the very least half of the stories that are not going to be available to you based on the decisions that you made, or based on the bad things that you've allowed to happen. I'm going to give you a vague example, which may or may not be in the game. So let's say, for example, there's one story you play that's a Draugr invasion. There's a whole bunch of Draugrs that have come in from the east, and they're attacking the elves, and they're also attacking the dwarves. Attacking the dwarves, you don't have enough time to save everybody, of course. So you are going to have to use the time you have to decide whether you're going to save the elven outpost or whether you're going to save the dwarven outpost. If you don't save the elven outpost, well, then the elves are not going to be very happy with you, and you're probably not going to gain access to all the elven branch of the storyline for the rest of the game. And you'll gain access to the dwarven one, and vice versa, depending on which one you choose to help. That's already half the story is gone, right? So that's one example. There are examples, even inside that, there are sub-stories in every story. So even though if I play one story, there will be a number of what we call interest points of interest. They will be customized based on the events of stories that happened beforehand. So let's say, for example, I started this invasion story. At the beginning, I will be reading through the storybook, and here's I'm using the example of our demo. This is not the final book of sagas. This is the demo that we use. So, for example, I might open it up here, and when I read through the story, it will ask me, oh, by the way, if this rune happens to be in play, and this rune is tied to a particular event in another story. We did that so we don't have to show you spoilers. Instead, start on this paragraph. Don't start here. That the reason we did that is because we want to make every story have a customizable beginning and customizable endings. So that Drugger invasion may be set up completely differently based on the 2 or 3 stories that you've done ahead of time. I won't get any more spoilery than that. The second part of the question is, can you tell us about playing solo? So yeah, solo play, of course, being a cooperative game is very important to us. The solo rules are currently still under development. The game does play smoothly without any rules tweaks playing solo, but we're doing a couple of experiments right now with because we want all player counts not only to be possible but also really cool. So we're doing a couple of little experiments right now. So I'm going to be a little bit vague. The current rules, as it stands, is one player has to play 2 characters. One as your main character, one as a companion. The reason we did that was because teamwork is such a big part of the game. We wanted to keep that dynamic, even if you're a single player. And the idea of splitting up or staying together is so compelling in all role-playing games, just like this one, that we will make sure at the end of the day that solo play is fun. But those are the current rules that we have going on right now. They're testing quite well, but we are always open to keeping to any elegant, simple tweaks that will make it work even better. All right, so we have a couple of questions here. How customizable are classes and equipment? Will there be any set of equipment that are only available for a certain class? Yes, so this is a question that I'm going to broaden it out a little bit to character development. So every character belongs to a class, and is of course is their own characters. Vulgar the warrior. Sorry. Testing. I'm getting a poor wireless. Apologies everyone for the technical difficulty. Okay, I'm going to continue, even though I'm getting this error message. I've got a tech support on the other side just to let me know how this is going. So I'm going to go to the next question. Oh yeah, sorry. How customizable are classes and equipment? So I'll get back to that. So if I'm playing Vulgar the Warrior, my character experience is based on 2 factors. The first factor being that I'm playing Vulgar the character, and the second that I'm playing the warrior class. The warrior class is going to tell me which skills are available to me, and those skills are only available to the warrior. Vulgar is going to have 2 cards that are only for himself, and they're only available for himself and no other character. So even if I play another warrior, if I play a different character, and I'm going to be careful not to spoil which characters that you may play, that character is a warrior. That character is going to retain the warrior skills, but they're going to bring their own new cards to the table. Every card is upgradable in particular ways. So let's say you may have a skill. You may have a skill called Bash for the warrior. You may upgrade that skill into 1 or more different branching abilities. So I'm going to show you here. This is an old demo copy. Don't worry, of course, this is all of this is a work in progress. It will be updated for the final release. So this is an old development version of the road card set. if at the end of a session I may decide that SAP has been working really well for me, I want to upgrade that into more of an ice discipline, which can cause a little bit of a stun as well. Or I might say, oh wait, I want to actually go for a I actually might want to go for a slightly more fire-based one, which will deal damage really quick, but which will deal a little bit more damage, and sometimes even damage over time. But it won't be as it won't have the stun effect on it. This is something just based on customizing your character. Now, every character, every skill, and every personal character is unique in how they and how you can customize them. So some skills will have a greater variety of different branches that you can choose to upgrade. Some will be a little bit narrow and just based on pure power level. And that's different for every class. We want to make sure that every class feels different and also has interesting upgrade paths that make sense for that character. Sometimes you don't need a whole bunch of, because even then you're making a choice. Do I want to upgrade my shield bash, or do I want to upgrade my armor, or do I want to upgrade or do I want to upgrade my block skill, for example? So I'm going to go to another one. I just want my producer to send me a note here to say, to let you guys know that the Q&A will be available later on for those who cannot watch it. There's a question here, can the number of players change from game to game during a campaign? Yes, they absolutely can. So even though we are doing a campaign game, you will be playing multiple stories in a row. One of the features that we really wanted to make sure of in this game was that you could swap in characters in and out, so you're not stuck with always playing the same group or always the same set of characters. That presented a number of interesting and unique challenges for development, because we wanted to make sure that the game is playable. Like, maybe I want to play this game solo, and then I want to bring in 2 friends to play later, or we're going to give Volgar a break and we're going to bring in Ladana instead for another session. So I won't go into too much detail into how we scale this, but here's a couple of notes. The first is that one of the things that makes Trudvang unique among these types of storytelling games is that the world itself, the world of Trudvang, really is the 5th character in your party. So even though you guys are upgrading your characters and upgrading skills separately, your guardianship of the world and how you customize that board is a big part of the game. So, for example, we play. One of the things I enjoyed, for example, when I played in the campaign, was like I skipped a session and then came back and I found out that the mountains were on fire. I was like, how did that happen? And of course, the host of the storyteller said, well, we decided that we really needed to take care of a frost giant problem to the south, and we just kind of left the mountains on their own, and they burned. Sorry. So now I have to figure out whether we're going to go and spend time in their next story trying to fix that, or whether we're going to deal with problems that arise from that. So that is a thing. That's a real thing. So the way I think about it personally, and this is, every player is going to have a different approach to it. Generally speaking, the owner of the box is the host of the box. So they're probably going to be playing in most of the games in the campaign, but other players can switch in and out without too much problem. All right, so we're going to get to another question. What made you decide on doing the bag token system as opposed to dice? Excellent question. So there's many reasons, of course, but we'll start with one. So the haptics of pulling runes out of a bag, right? This is a game that's based on Norse mythology, right? So casting runes out of a bag has a really cool, authentic feel to it. And absolutely do not discount the cool factor of pulling runes out of a bag and then assigning them to cards. It feels really cool in play, and it has that, and it gives you that nice feel of like, all right, I wish to. Oh my goodness, I drew a demon rune. Wow, that's a failure. I drew a fire rune. Do I want to put it on my axe, or do I want to set up a block for a little bit later? Um, the other is that customizing your bag in the very basic, right? So there, your characters will come with a particular rune composition. Some of the skills that you get, some of the items that you get, some of the titles that you may get may change the composition of your bag just by offering runes. So at the beginning of every session, you'll just check your character to see which runes you're going to be putting into your bag. That's a macro. In the micro, which is just as important in any particular story, there are going to be options for customizing your bag just for that particular session. So, for example, there may or may not be cool city spaces on the map that you can go to and visit in order to spend a turn and add a particular rune to your bag that you really need for that session. Which, having played several of the more dangerous, more combat-oriented sessions, I can tell you is very, very useful. You can sort of customize on the fly, and you don't have to worry about making that selection permanent. The other is that, and this is something we didn't expose in the rules earlier because it's something that comes out later in the campaign, but there are abilities on characters that will let you lock runes. So you can do something really cool and really big, but once I've placed the rune on that ability, I've locked that ability. So that rune is lost for the rest of that session. Now that's really important, right? Because the strategic element of Trudvang is we wanted players to make a lot of choices between, do I want to do what's best for me right now, or do I anticipate what I'm going to need for the rest of the session? That coupled with we don't give you 100% of information at the beginning of every story. You actually have to read the flavor text. You have to read hints. You got to look through foreshadowing to deduce what you're going to need for the rest of the session. That's a really exciting part of the game. So I have seen games where people recklessly go in and like, all right, it's the first combat. I'm going to go in. I'm going to be heroic. I'm going to use all my fire runes and charge. And yes, I blew them away in this combat. Great. Oops. Now my bag is really short on fire runes. I either have to adapt, use different skills, or hope that I've customized myself and gotten different skills so I can adapt for later, or I might have to go visit some of those hopefully still standing places that can help me customize runes on the fly. So that's an example of some of the cool gameplay choices that you might make. All right, let me move on to the story. How does the order of phase cards and different phases affect the game? So this is one of my favorite features of Trudvang, and it's in the development of the game, which went through many iterations. This was one of those moments when we hit upon this, we were like, now we've got something special, right? Everybody on the dev team was super excited about this. So I'm going to show you again. This is a development copy of the game because I'm always working on tweaking stuff. So don't take this as gospel. So the sideboard, as I call it, right, the storyboard of the game, right, it has room for your bestiary here and your story cards up here, and also has your phase order. Sorry, this is hard to mirror. So when you play a game of Trudvang, right, the general course of play, besides reading stories and looking for clues, is you're going to play a turn. So every turn is going to be played by all players. And to start with, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to travel. Everybody's going to choose which region they're going to go to, and based on how many players cross borders, you're going to draw travel cards. Drawing travel cards is a different part of the game, which also gets customized through the story. And the travel cards is one of the is part of the AI matrix for the game, and that's going to tell you what is going on and how the living world is reacting to your traveling. So it's going to be a little bit of a timer system, and it's going to be a little bit of a side story, right? And this deck is going to change over time, of course, right? It's going to change every session. So after you travel, then you guys are going to be doing interactions. So you get to interact with the space that you're in. You're either going to interact by fighting monsters that are in your space. You're going to interact with interest points that are in your space. Interest points will lead to reading story cards, which any of you have read our looked at our demos, you can see that the story cards, I'm going to put it a little far from the camera here to avoid spoilers, right? These interaction cards, if you're on that space, you can always read this. You can always read this hint text, but then I'll be like, oh, I'm going to interact with you. What's in the dwarf fortress? It is this. Spoiler alert. Those are the basic. Those are the basics that you're going to do on your turn. And then, of course, in the second half of the turn, the game's going to react to you. There's a darkness phase at the very beginning, which the leader's going to draw a rune, and is going to activate spaces on the board that match that rune. And monsters are going to behave the way they do. Now, those are super basics. As the game goes on, the very, very phase structure of the game is also going to change. I'm going to give you a hypothetical which may or may not actually be in the story. So let's say, for example, in one version that you play, you may end up with a like, oh my God, I started a plague. What's going on? So there'll be a new phase added to the game where let's say a particular type of monster is now transmitting this plague. If that monster shares a space with you, you guys are going to get a plague condition which will interact with both the board, your runes, and the trouble deck to make your lives even more miserable. That's now there for the rest of the campaign until you do something about it or until the story changes that. And even, let's say that even the basic travel phase, even the basic interact phase, those can be changed. You can say, you can play a story where like, oh, the interact phase is now interact plus, and something else is going to happen as well, again, based on what you did before. I'm getting warning not to be too spoilery, so I'll stop there. But I promise you, like this, depending on which version of the campaign you play, you are going to have a very, very different board than somebody else who, even if they played several of the same stories, make different choices in those stories and may have gotten different cards. We have designed a ton of cards. A big part of our card budget is for the phase order, for the travel deck, for the bestiary, because those things are all going to evolve. This question didn't come up, and I just want to dovetail into, even though the phase order of the game can change as well, the bestiary can change. So we have there's a bestiary, as you saw in the bottom of the board. Let me find a card for it, a rough card. Oh, of course, it's in the board. Sorry about that, guys. Right, so here's a basic bestiary, right, with the basic stats of the Draugr. That is going to change over the campaign as well. Even though there's a main story going on, inside that story we have many different story arcs, and because of course it's a CMON game that has cool plastic miniatures, we wanted to elevate that to the storytelling format. So there's a story behind every monster that's in the game. They all have their own story, and it's not always just, oh, these guys are going to attack you in different ways. The way you relate to them is actually going to change based on the story that you go to, and you can permanently change them. I'm going to use this one example that I kept talking about with the dev team. Trudvang is a mythic game, which means you're going to take big, mythic, epic actions, right? So for those of you who remember in real Norse mythology, right, when Baldur struck down Jormungandr by slicing his eye open with his axe with such force and such ferocity, that in the future, all snakes are now born with slitted eyes because of that cool action. That's got that really mythic feel to it. We want to recapture that by having some interactions in the game be so consequential and so story-driven that you can permanently change how the monsters act in the game based on what you did. And again, a lot of these are mutually exclusive. So the Draugr in my game may behave very different from the Draugr in your game just because you did a slightly different story. I'm being told I don't have a lot of time, so I just want to answer two more questions. How many play hours in total can we assume from the base game? That's a really good question. So it's really easy for me to say, like, oh, 100 plus hours, right? But let me break it down for you a little bit. We want player agency to really matter, right? So a lot of this is going to depend on what choices that you guys make. So when you play a campaign of Trudvang from beginning to end, from story one to the ending, that is assuming that you complete every story and you never make any mistakes and you never have to go back and you never fail, right? Even that, just on its own, is about, I'd say, 20, 25 hours of gameplay. That's one possible branch. Now, of course, we love we want our stories to be replayable, but the way that we want to be replayable is narratively replayable. So if I want to start another campaign, I'm going to get a different story by making different choices. I only saw one of the possible endings for this campaign. I want to check out how to get to the other possible endings. And I promise you that the gameplay is going to be very different. Even if you go through similar stories, we don't show you all the options. So you can still have a very different experience just by making a couple of different choices, exposing yourself to different stories. So I'm going to say 100+ hours of gameplay. And that should be meaningful. Like, that's how many meaningful hours that you play, depending on how many campaigns you want to play, how many different experiences you want to have. All right, I am being told to wrap up. I'm going to ask one here: how long does combat last, and how important is it to the story? Combat, as I think some of you have seen, that we did demos for combat, because this is a narrative game, but it's a role-playing game, right? So of course combat has to be important. We want it to be interesting and tactical and impactful, right? So you're drawing runes out of a bag and you're assigning them to your power. So we had to balance very carefully the meaningfulness of combat versus downtime, right? So there will be points where some players are involved in combat and some players are doing something else. So we want to make sure that people aren't just sitting around forever waiting for their turn. So combat is fairly clippy, but the combat itself, if you just rush through a combat and you just go, all right, I'm going to do this, it could be pretty quick. It could be less than a minute easily. But the things that you have to weigh with combat is not only can I win or lose this combat, is what am I willing to give up to win this combat? Am I going to try to win it fast, lock up some runes, possibly take more damage? Healing is very difficult in Trudvang. Your hit points are a resource, and remember, if any characters die, that's it. You fail, and you're going to have to start over. That's important. And the second is some combats have a lot of combats have consequences. So even though if I'm just running into some wandering druggers, right, because I want to get some experience so I can get access to better cards, that's a real decision to make. You also might run into a story-based combat, which there are many, where the consequences of failing in a particular way or succeeding in a particular way actually has story-based impact. So you actually have to start making some choices of, all right, am I going to, for example, I'll give you one example. Sorry, my poor producer is saying, hurry up. For example, I'm going to name an actual case from a story, and I shouldn't be too spoilerish. I ended up in a case where I had to take, I was being chased by a large figure, let's say, and a number of druggers. And I was like, all right, I could finish off those druggers really quick, but the story here actually, I got a hint from reading the flavor text of the story that if I fight the ice giant over here close to the sea, that something is going to something is going to happen that's going to be beneficial for us, and especially since we've been ignoring the port authority, I think I'm going to have to help them out. So I'm going to take just enough damage. I'm going to ask my rogue friend to help to keep the druggers stationary, and I'm going to kite and pull the giant over to the port, even taking some damage as I do so, because I want to defeat him there. Luckily, it did pay off, and I in ways I didn't even expect. I didn't write that particular story; it was different dev, and I thought it was one of those great moments. I was like, yes, I'm really glad. I'm glad I decided to do that. That dovetails into my last point. Read the flavor text, read the story, read the hints, right? This is not a game where you just read a bunch of cards and see what happens, and the flavor text has nothing to do with the story. everything we do, the writing in this, which is expertly written by Eric Kelly, has foreshadowing, it has hints, it has and it's subtle, and some of it's red herrings. Not everything is true. So we want to give you lots of stuff to argue about and debate about what is the correct way to play. Anyway, that's it for questions. I'm out of time. I just want to say thank you guys very much for backing Trudvang. We're very, very excited about the game. I can't wait to show you some of the new reveals we have, which of course I can't spoil in this particular chat. We will certainly show you a little bit. We'll talk about and show you a little bit more in the future. We're writing more articles with a little bit more depth, skirting the line between exposing new mechanics and not spoiling story. So you'll see more of those articles come out. We just edited a cool class-based article, so you can see in more depth how the different classes are going to go. And I just want to talk about real quick that there is a really cool art book for the Chronicles of Trudvang, the role-playing game, that we will be offering relatively soon. If you guys like Paul Bonner's art, which, I mean, it's Paul Bonner, who is ridiculously awesome. Check it out. You know that we often have art books, and they're really good. This is no exception. It's fantastic. Take a look at the Kickstarter page, and I'll see you guys in the comments section. Thank you all.